Week 11 action. Jets and Colts, a pair of teams having disappointing seasons, a pair of teams in a bit of turmoil. Someone's got to win this game, right? Let's talk about keys to victory for both sides. Locked on Jets, Locked on Colts, crossover Thursday.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome. It is crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Jets and Locked On Colts ahead of this Week 11 matchup. I'm John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets, along with Zach Hicks, co-host of Locked On Colts. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Well, Zach, good to be with you today. When the schedule came out, this was a Sunday night football game, and instead we are in the early time slot on CBS with Andrew Catalon, Tiki Barber, and JC McCourty. And nothing against those guys. They're very solid announcers, but it's a sign that neither team is really having the season they'd hoped they'd have.
Yeah, it's definitely not been the greatest season for either of these teams. I mean, for the Jets, obviously they had Super Bowl aspirations with Aaron Rodgers coming back from injury. The Indianapolis Colts, while the expectations weren't as high as the Jets, I don't think, there was still expectation of playoffs. And as it stands right now, neither of this team are playoff teams right now. They've had turmoil from injuries to, the Colts just made another quarterback change at the time we're recording this. Who knows if they make another one by the time this posts? We never know with this Colts team right now. So very fascinating season from our two teams for sure so far.
Okay, so maybe we could timestamp this. Which quarterback change is going on with the Colts right now? Because that's got to be the number one story of the week right now, is what's going on with the quarterback position with the Indianapolis Colts. So what's the latest?
Yeah, the latest is they're going back to Anthony Richardson. It's kind of that snip-snap that we're kind of getting right now with this Colts team, where a couple weeks ago they made the move to Joe Flacco. Head coach Shane Steichen said he owed it to the veterans on the team to put in the option that gave them the best chance to win. And they kind of talked about, behind the scenes working on Anthony Richardson with his being a professionalism, and stuff like that. You go these 2 weeks with Joe Flacco, it's some truly dreadful quarterback play, which, again, you never really know what you're getting with Flacco, even from the early parts of his career, but especially these last couple years. You guys saw him as a backup here in New York a couple years ago. Last year had that great run with the Browns. This year with the Colts, little high, little low, but a lot of low recently. And the Colts decided to go back to Anthony Richardson. Now, they're kind of coming out and saying that this was kind of the plan all along, was like they're not outright saying it was only like a 2-game suspension or something like that for Anthony Richardson, but they're kind of saying like, we always believed Richardson was our guy. We were eventually going to go back to him regardless. And the time felt right now. But we don't really know, as people in the media or even people, sitting at home watching these press conferences, what really was the decision behind the scenes when it came down to all this. Was it a disciplinary thing for Anthony Richardson with the tap out against the Houston Texans? Maybe. Was it a performance thing? And Joe Flacco's performance these last 2 weeks were so awful, they said, you know what, let's just go back to the young kid, I guess, because, is Flacco still the starter if he wins one of these past 2 games, or he plays well even in these past 2 games? I'm not too sure, but all we can really say for right now is Anthony Richardson is the starter, and it clearly changes the trajectory of this Colts offense in a lot of ways. It's a very, very different offense with Anthony Richardson, for better and for worse. And we'll see if that can accumulate into a win this week against the New York Jets.
So, I think obviously mobility there's a big difference between Anthony Richardson's mobility and Joe Flacco's mobility. But what other ways will this offense be different with him under center versus what we've seen the last couple of weeks with Flacco?
Yeah, we've talked about a lot on Locked On Colts and just everywhere these past couple of weeks with Joe Flacco, where when you make the move to Flacco, you're making the move for better efficiency, for better completion percentage, for early down, or not even early down, just getting the ball moving and higher success rate on offense. You're trying to get more productive drives on offense with Joe Flacco. Now, they weren't getting that with Joe Flacco these past 2 weeks. They were getting a lot of bad turnovers. The offense had 6 turnovers the last 2 weeks. He was responsible for 5 of them, maybe 4 if you don't count the sack fumble, but 4 to 5 of the turnovers the past 2 weeks were on Joe Flacco. And that simply wasn't good enough for when you're losing the mobility and you're losing the run game and losing the explosive play. But that's what Richardson kind of brings back to the offense, is that floor of the offense being a very good rushing attack, near top 10 in success rate and rush EPA, with Anthony Richardson in the game. Really good early down success with Anthony Richardson at converting first downs for more first downs. You get the explosive play rate back up, which Richardson was great at early in the season. And you just get a guy who can create a little bit. That everything doesn't need to be perfect. You have a guy who can break off sacks in the backfield. You get a guy who can create when the play breaks down, unlike Joe Flacco, where when the play breaks down, he's going to do what I'm going to do if I were a quarterback and just fall down in the backfield and call it a day right there. But you do lose a little bit of that efficiency. You lose some of the completion percentage, and you kind of fall back to that floor that Richardson gives you. The hope right now with Richardson is he can just bring you above that floor that he sets already just by being on the field. Because again, the run game is good with him. The explosives are good with him. Can he bring you anything else? Can he be at least an adequate success rate quarterback? Can he be a guy who can somewhat sustain drives? That's what we didn't see from him early this season. But even if he just goes back to what he played like early in the season, you still get the explosives, you still get a good run game, and you still get enough to, maybe get some wins out there. In 5 starts, I think they were 2-3 with him this year, or I guess in 6 starts they were 3-3, but in 5 games he finished, they were 2-3. So he did get them winning some games when he was out there. It really just comes down to, can he elevate his play even a little bit from what he was giving early in the season?
What are the big stories happen on the Colts on the defensive side of the ball right now?
Yeah, right now it's kind of the big change that we're seeing on the defense. The defense had this absolute disaster class performance against the Jacksonville Jaguars a couple weeks ago. I think it was like 5 weeks ago now at this point, where they gave up 37 points to a 1-win Jaguars team. And it was just a dreadful, dreadful performance. But since then, every single thing we say bad about Gus Bradley in the media, from he's a stagnant, old ball coach who doesn't change and only runs his cover 3 and doesn't blitz. Well, in these past 5 weeks, we've seen a coach who has changed to more cover 2 and changed more cover 4. A coach that has blitzed at like a 30% rate, which is like the highest I've ever seen Gus Bradley do. They're getting a ton of pressure up front. These past 3 games against 3 playoff caliber teams, they have a 53% pressure rate these past couple games. So just doing some really good things to get some pressure, and they're forcing a ton of turnovers. I think they're second in the NFL right now in forced turnovers as a defense. They're coming off a 3-game stretch against, again, 3 playoff teams where they forced 6 turnovers, and that including forcing Josh Allen to tie his season high in picks for the whole season in just 1 game. He threw 2 picks against the Indianapolis Colts this past week. So they force a lot of turnovers. They're getting after it in the past game. Run defense is still a little questionable, but you're seeing this big turnaround from a defense that looked dead in the water 5 weeks ago to now a pretty adequate group that punches the ball out and stands tall in the red zone. So we'll take that as a defense. If you can go from awful to adequate with turnover heavy, that's a big win in my book. And this defense has played well enough these past couple weeks to get some wins. It's just their offense hasn't really given them the help on the other side of the ball.
Who are some of the key names on the defense?
The 2 big ones are DeForest Buckner and Kenny Moore II. Those are your 2 playmakers, your 2 A players on this defense. The rest of the guys are more, C+, B type players. I mean, Grover Stewart, I think, is like a B+ player at nose tackle. But DeForest Buckner is such an impact pass rusher. He's been such a massive player since coming back from injury. And then Kenny Moore II in the slot. I mean, from run defense to pass coverage to making plays as a playmaker, he's the guy you really want to watch. He has a fumble recovery for a touchdown against the Minnesota Vikings, and he had an insane pick against Josh Allen last week. So that's really the guy you got to watch in the secondary right there.
Oh, that's an excellent scouting report on the Indianapolis Colts. As we continue here on this crossover Thursday of Locked On Jets and Locked On Colts, we're going to flip the script. I'll tell you what's going on with the New York Jets. There's a lot going on. There's not a lot good. We'll get to that continuing here on crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode of Locked On Jets and Locked On Colts is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Well, our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, and discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. Again, that's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Today's episode of Locked On Jets and Locked On Colts is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And you don't need to wait for the game to start to put money down. Jets currently 3.5-point home favorites. I think a lot of Jets fans may disagree with the Jets being favored over anybody at this point. I don't know, maybe Colts fans agree with the Jets being favored. But no matter what, if you go to FanDuel again, you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League.
All right. We are back, guys. We're talking Colts, Jets, Locked On crossover Thursday. And John, so I'm going to lead off this section and kind of kick it to you about this Jets team. Where do we begin with this Jets team, John? Like, again, it's supposed to be a Super Bowl team with a ready-made defense, a quarterback ready to go, weapons. I mean, they even traded for Devontae Adams. Head coach is fired. Getting blown out this past week by the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, what's the biggest storyline with this team right now?
I was going to ask you, where do you want to start? Because we could go anywhere. I think we could do probably a week full of crossover shows on the demise of the 2024 New York Jets. There are two things that really stand out to me, and they're kind of related. First of all, and this is something we talked about on Locked On Jets through the entire offseason, is that the operative phrase for the 2024 New York Jets was on paper, because on paper, the roster looked really good. But they were also depending on a lot of guys who were older players, guys in their 30s, guys approaching their 30s. And there's always a question, even guys who are still playing at a really high level at that age, it can go quickly for them. Aaron Rodgers, we know he's one of the top 15 quarterbacks of all time, maybe even one of the top 10 quarterbacks of all time. He was coming off a really serious injury. He also, and this is kind of quiet, his last year in Green Bay was the worst year of his career. So 2 years ago in Green Bay, he had a year that was not very good. And you could have blamed it. He did not have great receivers that year. He was also dealing with an injury on his throwing hand that year, but it also was a possible sign of decline. And I think that we're seeing that really was the first sign that things were kind of going downhill for them. And then he suffers an Achilles injury, which drives things even further downhill. Tyron Smith, who I don't think is going to play in this game. I actually would be surprised if we saw Tyron Smith in the Jets uniform again, because he suffered an injury against Arizona. He was having a bad year. Guy was really just a rock solid player. One of the greatest left tackles of his generation, but not the same level of player. Hassan Reddick's a bit of a different story. Hassan Reddick, the Jets completed the trade for him. Big star guy over the last 4 years. One of the top players in sacks in the NFL. 4 straight 11+ sack seasons. He showed up. He wanted a new contract. And I said this many times on Locked On Jets. A lot of people may disagree with me. I don't see how you trade for this guy without knowing that he wants a new contract. The whole reason he was traded was that the Eagles did not want to pay him the contract that he sought. So, the Jets were really good on paper, but paper doesn't win you games. And when you have this many guys who are, again, aging, it kind of, it can go south really quickly. And this is probably the worst version of the Jets you could get. And that leads into what I think the second issue is, which is this is a collection of players. It's not a team. And I know that can be a cliche, but if you watch these guys, they're not fighting hard. I mean, that game against Arizona was a disaster. I don't think I've ever said a team gave no effort. I've been the host of Locked On Jets since the very beginning back in 2016. So 8 years, this is my 9th season doing this. I've never said that a team openly quit on the field before. That team just showed no effort in the game against Arizona. I mean, you watch Jets miss 20 tackles, not just that they missed 20 tackles. If you watch the game over, Robert Salah, when he installed this defense, and he's not here anymore, he always preached that, first guy tackles, guys 2 and 3 need to keep hustling and get after him, clean things up if the first guy misses his tackle. That was not happening against Arizona. This is a team that, I don't know the other way to say it. They just act like they don't care. It's a collection of big names. It's not a bunch of guys fighting for each other right now.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to my question about the offense right now, because this offense, again, on paper, was supposed to be a pretty big factor in the season. Obviously, the defense, we knew what they were coming into the year, and they've disappointed to a degree. But for the most part, the defense has been fine-ish, but the offense was supposed to be, this big thing with Aaron Rodgers, especially with Garrett Wilson, with Breece Hall, Devontae Adams coming in. Has it been those big name players letting down, like the Rodgers and the Garrett Wilsons and the Devontae Adams, or has it really been like the play caller or the offensive line that has really just been the crux of the issue on offense?
It's shocking to say this from a Jets perspective. The offensive line's actually been the least of their problems outside of Tyron Smith. You go into the season, you think Tyron Smith's going to be solid. I don't know about these other guys. The offensive line has actually been pretty solid. I think it's been everybody else. Look, they made a trade for Devontae Adams. Again, this is another guy who big reputation, 3-time first team All-Pro, and I'm sure he can help a team, and he had a big game against Houston, but this is not the 1,500-yard Devontae Adams of 3 years ago. Again, Jets banking on an older type player. I think Garrett Wilson's had a decent season. He's been up and down. He had a couple weeks ago against Pittsburgh, had a really ugly play, which it should have been a catch. Instead, it hit him in the chest. The ball popped in the air and turned into an interception. It took some time for him to Rodgers to get on the same page. I think he's having a decent season. Breece Hall got off to a slow start. I think he started to bounce back recently. I think the biggest issue with the Jets on offense, though, is that there's really not much of an ability to make big plays in the passing game. And part of that's, they don't really have a pure deep threat. Garrett Wilson's a really good technician. He's a guy who can create early separation, pretty good after the catch, but he's not a down the field threat. Devontae Adams, I guess, is, similar, really great getting releases off the line of scrimmage. But I think the bigger issue is just what Rodgers is right now. Rodgers is a guy who just seems afraid to take a hit, and there's good reason for that because he's been playing banged up since like week 4. Another thing about aging is that your body doesn't recover from injuries or even the bumps and bruises as quickly as it used to. And I don't think he's been hit a ton, but when he's been hit, he's been banged up. I mean, I think there are probably 3 or 4 games this year he's had to, he's either limped off the field or gone to the tent to check out an injury. It happened against Arizona after a hit he took on a 4th down play early in the second half. I don't think Rodgers physically can hold up to the grind of an NFL season anymore. And he's afraid of getting hit for that reason, which means he's getting the ball out as quick as possible. And when you're just dumping the ball off as quick as you can't let plays marinate. Receivers can't get down the field, and it really limits what you can do on offense. Jets had a couple long drives against Arizona that ended in points, an 11-play drive and a 12-play drive. Those are the first 2 times they had the ball. They ended in field goals. The problem is that it takes those plays to get the Jets into scoring range just because of their inability to hit the splash plays.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting thing because that's what the Colts want you to do. Is the Colts want you to march down the field on 10, 12, 13 play drives and see if you can convert in the red zone. So really, really good thing there for the Colts, at least. Going to this Jets defense, though, I think the biggest thing with this Jets defense, obviously you mentioned the missed tackles this past week, but just the fall off in play from the head coach move. Like once the head coach move happened, this defense, it seems like lost a lot of life. I mean, they haven't changed anything schematically or lost any players. It just, I don't know, just for me as an outsider, John, it feels like they lost a lot of their soul, I guess, when they made that change of head coach.
That's really an interesting point. And Robert Salah's record speaks for itself. I think it was 20-36. He did not have a winning season. I think it's fair to say Robert Salah is a bad head coach, but I don't think he lost the team. And everything that's come out since that move was made just made it seem like it was a really impulsive move by the owner, Woody Johnson. It seemed like he was angry because they lost in London. He was, he used to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom. So his school thought he was embarrassed in front of his friends. Doesn't sound like we could talk about the relationship between the owner and the GM right now it's not clear how much involvement the GM has in actually running the team right now, because it doesn't sound like the GM was consulted on this move. It seems like it did not galvanize the team. And I think that there is also a tangible impact here, is that Salah probably had a lot to do with running the defense. And there's a bit of a double whammy effect, because not only do you lose Salah, who for all of his faults as a head coach is a good defensive mind, the defensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich, was promoted to head coach, and he kept his defensive coordinator responsibility. So now you have this guy, he's being pulled in all these different directions. I think he's stretched a little thin right now, and I think he should have appointed a new defensive coordinator. I think that was a mistake, trying to keep it all on himself. But, he's being pulled in all these different directions. So I think there's a bit of a double whammy effect there. I do think that, some of the early success statistically you saw from this team was a function of them facing offenses that weren't very good. Tennessee with Will Levis, a work in progress, let's say. New England's not a great offense. We'll be diplomatic there. But yeah, I do think, Zach, there's something to the idea that this coaching change, well, again, I'm not going to defend Robert Salah as a head coach, but if your choice is two bad options, keeping Robert Salah or what choice what you've moved on to, they probably would have been better off keeping Salah, at least for the rest of the season.
Yeah, completely agree. And just one more real quick. Who are the playmakers that you see in this game for the Jets that can make a big difference if the Jets were to somehow pull off the victory? I mean, again, they're coming off a rough game, but if they could pull it off, who are the playmakers for the Jets?
I think it's the usual suspects. I think, Breece Hall, to the extent they have a big play threat, he hasn't produced a lot of big plays this year, but Breece Hall in the run game is a big play threat, big speed, really the only home run hitter that the Jets have on offense. And after a really slow start, he started to elevate his game the last couple of weeks. Garrett Wilson and Rodgers have developed a good rapport after getting off to a bit of a shaky start. He's had a couple 100-yard games recently. You always look to Devontae Adams. Adams has probably played one good game out of 4 in a Jets uniform, but Rodgers is going to look to him. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I think, question, what's Quinnen Williams going to do? Quinnen Williams, back-to-back Pro Bowl seasons, but not having as big of a year this year. He's shown some flashes. Jets defensive line is not as strong as it's been in the past, and that's another source of their defensive woes. But if Quinnen Williams can play like Quinnen Williams, he kind of has a multiplier effect. He just makes everybody better around him. So, I think it's the names you'd expect. I don't think there are many names. I think a lot of the guys the Jets have are household names. They're not playing like household names, but Jets win, you can expect a big performance from them. So you've heard about the Jets. You've heard about the Colts. As we continue here on this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Jets and Locked On Colts, we're going to get to our keys to victory. What did the Jets need to do to win? What did the Colts need to do to win? We'll tell you ahead on this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Jets and Locked On Colts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Our episode of Locked On Jets and Locked On Colts today is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5, and you don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONNFL, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Locked On Jets, Locked On Colts crossover Thursday had a Week 11 action. Colts coming to the Meadowlands, a game that was originally scheduled for Sunday night is now 1 o'clock Eastern time on Sunday. Zach, we'll start with you. Colts are the road team. What are your keys to victory for Indianapolis?
I really think it just comes down to the quarterback play. What can we get out of this quarterback position for the Indianapolis Colts? You look at what they did last week against the Buffalo Bills team, and I know the scoreboard didn't say this, but it was a closely fought game where the Colts really had a good chance to knock off one of the top teams in the AFC. It's just their quarterback forgot what team he played for most of the game. He threw a lot of interceptions in this one. He made a lot of mistakes. And really, they had a lot of playmakers on offense and defense show up, and their quarterback simply didn't. So they're making the move back to Anthony Richardson. He's giving you a good floor, again, of explosive passing plays, explosive run games, a good running attack, and overall success on early downs. But can he build from that? Can he take his completion percentage from 40% to 50 to 55%? We will take this at that point because it'll just elevate the floor of this team even higher and make it so this offense can be more manageable. The Colts defense has been racking up some good performances lately and been punching the ball out, forcing turnovers, and doing their thing. And the playmakers from A.D. Mitchell to Josh Downs to Alec Pierce have been performing at wide receiver. They simply need the quarterback play to be there this week. That is the ultimate key to victory, is can the quarterback play just be adequate? All I'm asking for is adequate. That's all it needs. It's all it needs right now. This is not even a shot at the Jets. It's really against anybody right now. It could be against the Minnesota Vikings 2 weeks ago, the Buffalo Bills last week. Just give me adequate quarterback play, And the Colts are a playoff team right now. So that's really what it comes down to. Anthony Richardson, what did he learn from with these 2 weeks on the bench? Hopefully he didn't learn too much from Joe Flacco's play on the field, but maybe he learned from Joe Flacco's experience off the field and just learned from his own experience of being benched and comes out there with a new fire and desire to get this win for the Colts. Because if the quarterback play can at least hit adequate this week, the Colts should be able to get the victory here against the New York Jets.
Well, I have 3 keys for the Jets. Number one, they need to show up to play. I mean, if you watch that game against Arizona, it was like I hate to like go into cliches like this about effort and hustle, but there was zero effort in that game. It was like guys didn't care. And what was frustrating was they were coming off a huge win against Houston, and they kept saying we turned our season around, and they had 3 extra days to prepare. They got some good results in the early game Sunday. They got help that they needed because Denver currently owns the 7th seed in the AFC. Denver lost, and Denver should have won that game against the Chiefs. So everything was lined up for them. And it's not just that they lost; it's that they were dominated from the opening kickoff. So, I mean, does this team have any fight left in them? We'll start to find out on Sunday. Number 2. This is a late change because the Colts have a late quarterback change, and I don't know. By the time you're listening to this podcast, maybe the Colts will have gone back to Flacco, or maybe sign somebody else. I don't know. But when I heard the change to Anthony Richardson, my first thought was good from the standpoint that I always feel like when you're facing an opponent with like an unclear quarterback situation, kind of throw the team into disarray. Then I thought this through, and I thought about how bad the Jets are against the run. And facing Anthony Richardson, that's going to be a challenge. No, I was a little disappointed because I wanted to make the joke that the game got flexed from Sunday night to 1:00 because you have to give the early bird special to Flacco and Aaron Rodgers, so that joke's out the window. With Richardson in the lineup, the Colts rushing game becomes more dynamic. This is a tough rushing attack to face. The Jets have not played well against the run this year. I think this is another case where the numbers look a little bit better than the reality for the Jets. Jets have been dominated at points, I think, practically every game against the run. There have been some games where they've responded. They've had a bad first half and responded in the second half, or vice versa. I don't think there's been a full game outside of maybe week 3 against the Patriots where they completely shut down the other team's run game. This is going to be a real challenge. Jets need to tackle. Anthony Richardson's not an easy guy to bring down. Colts have some talent in their backfield. Jets need to tackle. No, if they miss 20 tackles in this game, they're going to get blown out again. And the third key is something you alluded to, the Colts blitzing a little bit more with Gus Bradley. This is Jets team that's been awful against the blitz. And I think part of it is Rodgers at 40 coming off an Achilles has pretty much no mobility left. He can move. There was one play against Arizona where he kind of he moved to his right and threw back across the field to Jeremy Ruckert. And the guys calling the game on CBS praised his mobility. And I was like, yeah, but nobody was chasing him there. He just kind of drifted off on his own. Rodgers is at a point where he can't outrun defensive tackles. And that's what happened on the play I referenced where he had to go to the tent after because he got injured. Rodgers can't evade any pass rushers. And that's made him very vulnerable to the blitz, in part because he has not really altered his game. In the past, in Green Bay, he could always outrun guys. He could always extend plays. In his current state, he can't do that. And I still don't think he's fully adjusted his game to that reality. I think that, he's not finding his hot routes quickly enough when he's under pressure. He's not doing the things he needs to do, and he can't outrun these guys anymore, which means the Jets need to do a better job protecting against the blitz. I think that means they need to leave extra blockers in frequently, particularly because they could be playing a left tackle who's a rookie, Olu Fashanu. He started a couple games early in the season, but at right tackle, this could be his first start of his career at left tackle. I think they'll need to help him out as often as possible. But with the Jets this year, outside of maybe the game they played against Houston, when teams have blitz, it's been an automatic sack virtually. It's a guarantee to shut the Jets offense down. So they need to handle that well. And I think that means leaving extra blockers in. Well, Zach, one of these teams has to win this game, right? Unless it's a tie.
Oh gosh, please don't say that. But look, guys, this is a playoff determining game still, technically, right? We're still fighting for that 7th seed, right? This could be the make or break for our teams right here, guys.
I agree with the break part. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the Colts can turn it around. I don't know. Maybe I'm too negative. Maybe this is the Jets turning it around. Anyway, Zach, really great chatting with you. Hopefully our teams are better the next time we do this.
Yeah, please. Let's hope.
And thanks to all of you for listening. And thank you for making Locked On Jets and Locked On Colts your first listen every single day. I'm John Butchko from Locked On Jets. He's Zach Hicks from Locked On Colts. Tune into our shows tomorrow. We'll continue to preview Week 11 between the Jets and the Colts.